Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
This is my opening statement, and this is my opportunity to tell you about two things: my theory of the case and the anticipated facts that I believe you're going to hear throughout this case. Ultimately, though, I anticipate that the question that you are going to have to answer when you go into that jury room to deliberate after hearing all of the evidence over the course of the next few weeks, and beyond the elements that I need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, is whether this verdict is going to be first-degree murder or second-degree murder. That is, when Efrain Medina shot and killed Natalie Ramstrom, did he premeditate and deliberate before doing so? We'll talk about the difference between first and second-degree murder in closing arguments, but suffice it to say right now, first-degree murder requires an intent to kill that was acted upon with premeditation and deliberation. Second degree does not. Now, in addition to that question, and in any criminal case, not just in Michigan, but across the country, the prosecutor, and in this case, I need to prove identity. That is, you are going to have to conclude, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Efrain Medina is the one who pulled the trigger that killed Natalie Ramstrom. Why do I mention that to you now? Because I am up front going to tell you what you will not hear through the course of this trial. No witness that sits on that stand is going to point to Efrain Medina and say, I saw him pull the trigger and shoot and kill Natalie Ramstrom. I think you got that through our voir dire, that this is a circumstantial case. What I do anticipate presenting to you are a set of circumstances. A set of circumstances that overwhelmingly, inevitably, only lead to the conclusion that beyond a reasonable doubt, Efrain Medina is guilty of first-degree murder. I anticipate presenting that set of circumstances to you over the course of the next few weeks. The second part of an opening statement is to tell you what I anticipate you're going to hear through the several witnesses that are going to testify. And I'm going to do that now. In this case, we go back to October 27th of 2020. On that day, around 9 or 10 o'clock, Natalie Ramstrom's body was discovered at the address of 121 Catherine Street in River Rouge, Michigan, Wayne County. Her body was discovered by two individuals, Joelle Madrigal and Blanca Barrera, both of whom you'll hear from. And we're going to talk a lot about that property at 121 Catherine Street. The residents and the owners were Blanca, Joelle, and then Blanca's boyfriend or fiance or husband, Joe Manriquez. You're going to hear from all three of them, and they'll tell you about this. But on this property, there's a main house where those three lived at the time, and then a guest house. You will hear that the guest house was rented out. It was initially rented out to a couple of Mr. Medina's co-workers or union members. He was an electrician that worked at the Mac plant, but when he moved in, he took over that lease for the guest house as sort of a sublease. This was all in October of 2020. At that time, he was in a relationship with Natalie Ramstrom. Now, to understand how we get to her body being discovered on the 27th, we have to go back about a week prior to the Monday, the 19th, or Tuesday, the 20th of October in 2020. At that time, the defendant was living at that house, was staying there. He had taken over the lease. Natalie was coming from Indiana, where she was living at the time, to visit her boyfriend, the defendant. She arrives there earlier in the week, and as she arrives there, the defendant is keeping his work schedule. He works at the Mack Avenue plant, Chrysler or Stellantis plant at the time, or Chrysler plant at the time, and his schedule was second shift, meaning he would leave early afternoon and come back early morning hours the next day, about a 12-hour shift at the time. While he was at work, Natalie became friendly with Blanca and Joe, who lived in the main house at the time. She became friendly with Blanca specifically. I believe you'll hear that Blanca took her to a Walmart to get a few things, an air mattress, and things like that. Nothing too serious. And I believe that was on the Tuesday or Wednesday. On the Thursday, you'll hear about an outing that Blanca, Joe, and Natalie went to at Mr. K's Bar, which is a very important location in this case. On Thursday, though, the three of them proceed. This is the 22nd of October. Proceed to the bar, have a few beers, have a burger or whatever, eat some food, and proceed back home. Friday, everything is normal. Natalie Ramstrom's still around, the defendant's still around, going to work and whatnot. At this point, I anticipate you will hear that Blanca and Joelle got familiar with Natalie's routine. She had brought her dog Baxter with her from Indiana, and that they consistently saw her outside with the dog, playing with the dog, smoking cigarettes, whatever you have. They would see her around the property consistently. We now go to Saturday, October 24th. The defendant had left for work at an early afternoon. Blanca, Joe were having some sort of celebratory dinner for a member of their family. Natalie was invited over and had dinner with them. After that dinner, Natalie, Joe, Blanca, and one of Blanca's friends proceed back to Mr. K's. Mr. K's is a local neighborhood bar, has its fair share of regulars, some of whom Natalie had met on Thursday. They proceed back to that bar. Saturday night, around 10, 11 o'clock is when they walk in, and you're going to see video from inside the bar, a lot of video from inside the bar. You're going to see Natalie and the three others walk in. You're going to see how Natalie was acting, and no shame about it, she was drinking. Nothing wrong with that. She was having a good time. You'll see her talk to particularly two individuals, Barta Moores and David Reese, both of whom you will hear from. Barta Moores and David Reese were roommates at the time. She had briefly met them on Thursday. She recognized them, began talking with them. She was having a good time, dancing, and you'll see all of this on these videos. They stayed for a few hours. Eventually, Joe and Blanca wanted to leave. They take Natalie with them. They drive back the 1 block to the house at 121 Catherine Street. But before Natalie left, she told David and Bart that she would come back. You'll see on the video about 5-10 minutes after they leave, Natalie walks back in the bar. We're getting close to 2 a.m., so we're now into Sunday morning, early morning hours on the 25th. She's talking again after she comes back with Bart and David. Bart ends up ordering food, paying his tab, and leaving to go back to where he and David lived, which again is very close to the bar. Everything is within like a 3-block radius, and you'll see that, and you'll hear that from the witnesses. Natalie and David stay behind. They have one more drink. Natalie and David agree to go back to Bart and David's house. David texts Bart, asks if that's okay. He's not thrilled about it, but he says okay. About 15 minutes after David and Natalie leave, you'll see on that video the defendant, Efrain Medina, walk into the bar, presumably looking for Natalie because he had returned home from work. You'll see on another set of video from Tom's One Stop Auto Shop, which is a body shop very close to the 121 Catherine Street. You'll see the defendant's truck, a GMC Black Sierra, pull into that driveway for the guest house. You'll see shortly after that truck pulls out, presumably, and the timing I anticipate will match up when he goes to the bar to look for Natalie, does not find her. Natalie is at David's house. David and Natalie go upstairs to David's room. They proceed to have sexual intercourse. David will tell you that. He will talk about that. He'll talk about why he didn't initially disclose that to the police because he was embarrassed. When the defendant walked into Mr. K's bar, it caused the bar owner to do something. Amanda Morris, again, you will hear from her. It caused Amanda to text or call Bart, who was a regular at that time at the bar, saying that girl's boyfriend is looking for her. Bart is now pissed because he doesn't want any trouble at his house. He calls upstairs saying she's got to go. Natalie and David get their selves together, proceed down the stairs, and out of the door, David, I anticipate, will testify that he sees Natalie walk back towards Mr. K's and also back towards the 121 Catherine Street. That is the last time that David sees Natalie alive, that Bart sees Natalie alive. And also, the last time that Joe and Blanca saw Natalie alive was when they first left Mr. K's bar. From there, we go into very few important days. This is early Sunday morning. Everybody the next morning wakes up. Natalie is nowhere to be found. She's not in the yard with the dog. She's not talking to anyone. She's not interacting with anyone. I anticipate the evidence will show that she was killed in the early morning hours of Sunday, October 25th, 2020. Nobody will hear or see from her again until the 27th when her body is found. At one point on Sunday during the day, Baxter the dog is running around the yard by himself. I anticipate you'll hear from Natalie's family, probably today after opening statements, that would be highly unusual for her to let happen. Because the dog was running around, Blanca actually takes the dog in. She also goes into the guest house very briefly just to grab the dog's food, which was by the front door. The next day on Monday, when the defendant was up and had returned from work, he was still living at this location in the guest house. Joel returns the dog to him, and he will talk about that interaction that he had with the defendant at the front door of that guest house. The next day, we're now on Monday during the day. The next time that you will hear, there is one other time that Joe, I think it's later in the day on Monday, Joel and Blanca go into the house. They'll talk about that and not seeing anything out of the ordinary. The next time that anyone goes into that house is Tuesday, October 27th, around 9 or 10 at night. Defendant's not there, he's at work. They go into that house, and immediately when they open the door, they're met with the smell of natural gas. The gas was coming from the stove, the gas stove in the house. The gas stove was also clicking. Baxter, the dog, was in the bathroom on the first floor of this house, in the bathroom with the water running. Joel smells that. He goes in, he shuts off the stove, he opens the door to the bathroom, lets the dog out, and then turns around and looks at the floor, where he sees Natalie Ramstrom's body, her torso covered in garbage bags. There is another garbage bag on the floor that has some items related to this murder. He backs out of the house, he calls 911, and then the police begin to respond. Police and fire because of the gas smell. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important to divide up the two portions of this case, because we have everything that happened from the 19th or 20th until when Natalie's body was found on the 27th at night. At that point, the investigation begins. Police begin to respond. There are two things going on at this point. The police are gathering information from Joe, Blanca, and Joe at the scene, and they're also learning who was living in that house. They're also in the process of documenting and preserving that scene. I'm going to talk about the scene first, and then I'm going to talk about what they learned. The scene was processed by the Michigan State Police Crime Response Team. You're going to hear from an employee of the Michigan State Police named Guy Nutter. He was on that team that processed the scene. You're going to see several hundreds of photos from inside of this house. You will be intimately familiar with the inside of this guest house. When you see these photos, it will proceed in a manner throughout the house that is chronological. When they get to the kitchen, you will see Natalie's body, torso covered in a garbage bag, and on the floor, by her feet, you will see another garbage bag with some towels in it and a cutout section of carpet. That cutout section of carpet came from upstairs, because I believe the evidence will show Natalie was not killed in the kitchen. When we proceed upstairs to the bedrooms, there is one bedroom that has a bed frame and a mattress on it. The mattress, when they first encountered it, was covered by a comforter or a sheet. When they pulled that sheet back, there is a massive amount of blood staining on that sheet. That blood leaked out onto the floor. That's the section of carpet that was cut out and placed into a garbage bag. You will also see everything else about this house, all of the details, all of the nooks and crannies about it. Going back to what the police were doing at the scene, gathering information, they learned that Efrain Medina was living there and Natalie had come to visit. They also learned where he worked, which is at that Mack plant, the Chrysler plant on Mack Avenue in Detroit. They send officers over there to go and talk to him, most likely to arrest him at that time as well. Because, and you're going to hear from an employee of the security team at that plant at that time, from now working for Stellantis, Paul Kondratovich. He's going to talk about the policy of the plant. The officers, for whatever reason, and you can agree with it, I certainly don't, were not allowed in the plant to go and talk to the defendant. The security team told the police that they would go in and get him. I anticipate the evidence to show that the defendant knew that the police were at the proverbial front door, and he knew what had happened and why they were there. You will see video, again, a lot of video from inside the plant. We'll match that video up initially with a key fob time report that shows exactly when the defendant swiped into the plant, and then we will follow him around. That will take some time, and it will be a little bit exhausting because that program that this video is on is not exactly user-friendly, but we'll get through that. And you will see Efrain Medina moving around that plant, hiding in bushes, hiding in different areas of this plant, certainly not doing his job, certainly not leaving when his shift was over, because he was there for over 24 hours. Eventually, you will see an individual get into a truck and exit the plant. At this point, you will hear via stipulation that the defendant, after he left the plant, left the country to go to Mexico, where he stayed over a year. He did come back, and I anticipate the evidence will show he came back after the charges were filed in this case. You will also hear from many expert witnesses, forensic scientists, the medical examiner, or the doctor who performed the autopsy. That's Dr. Lokman Sung. He will tell you that Natalie Ramstrom died as a result of a gunshot wound. You will see photos of that gunshot wound, which are to her head, and that the manner of death was homicide. And he'll talk about what both of those things mean. You will hear from fingerprint experts, latent print experts, same thing, DNA experts, talking about what DNA was found on a sexual assault kit that was done on Natalie, David Reese's, and the defendants. You will hear from a former employee of the Michigan State Police Latent Print Unit, Ashley Sellenrod. She is the one who tested the garbage bags for fingerprints. We'll talk a lot about that. We'll talk about why the bags had to be retested, but ultimately, you will hear that the defendant's fingerprint, I believe a thumbprint, was found on the garbage bag. Not the one on her torso, but the one with the cutout piece of paper or carpet and towels in it. You'll hear from some other shoe print experts. None of that's really going to, I think, sway you one way or the other, but we will present the evidence that we have. You will also hear about certain things that were not done. Maybe you'll think that they should be done. However, when we get to the closing arguments in this case, I will put up a timeline on the screen in the form of a PowerPoint. We will put the puzzle pieces together through the 20th to the 27th, through the investigation until today. And when I do that, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, the set of circumstances that I intend to present to you over the course of the next few weeks, I anticipate inevitably will lead to the conclusion that beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder and felony firearm. And that is exactly what I'm going to ask you to find them guilty of in a few weeks when we do closings. Thank you.